Hey everybody, this is going to be video 3 from the oh my goodness, from the disorders unit. Oh my gosh. As you notice, I've come inside because it was starting to get hot out there. So um, I'm in the hotel room and there's nothing really neat to see in here. It's kind of a random hotel room, but we'll go ahead and get moving with the schizophrenic disorders. We'll spend some time on it. There's quite a few slides, so that's probably all this video will be over. And then we'll move on to the different video for the rest of the PowerPoint. So, with schizophrenic disorders, this, as I mentioned kind of at the end of the last video, about 1 in every 100 people are diagnosed with schizophrenia. In our school, you're going to look between 7 and 8 people within their lifetime will be diagnosed with schizophrenia based on statistics. Some of the symptoms of schizophrenia: disorganized thinking, disturbed perceptions, seeing things that aren't there and vice versa, inappropriate emotions and actions. When we're looking at disorganized thinking, the thinking of a person with schizophrenia is fragmented, bizarre, and disoriented with false beliefs. Disorganized thinking comes from a breakdown in selective attention. I'll make sure you underline that because that's a big part of the disorganized thinking, is that they struggle from selective attention. They can't filter out information, whether if it's coming in or coming out. I don't know if any of you have ever read a book that's written in stream of consciousness. Basically, the author is writing down everything that is being thought. And to me, it's kind of odd. I feel like I've got something in my beard. All right, got it. But it's the inability to filter out information is where the disorganized thinking comes from. They a lot of times will suffer from delusions or false beliefs. These delusions can be in a couple different ways. Delusions of persecution, that everybody's out to get them, that the government's watching, the aliens are watching. These are that the police are always out to arrest them, that the government's looking for them. These are delusions of persecution. Now, my brother suffered from delusions of grandeur. He never thought he was Jesus, but he did say he was the king of the universe, and he was dead serious. He told me about all of the different cars that he owns. They're in his garage, and that's his delusion of that he is just the king of the universe. They'll also suffer from disturbed perceptions or hallucinations. These are sensory experiences without sensory stimulation, seeing things that aren't there, hearing things that aren't there. My brother had hallucinations as well. He would talk to people who weren't there. I'll never forget taking him to the doctor once when he was having an episode, and he would cover his mouth. I was driving, he was in the passenger seat, and he would cover his mouth and whisper to somebody who was like at the door or outside of the door. And when you asked him who he was talking to, he just looked at you. He didn't answer. And then when we got to the doctor's office, same thing. He would pull his sheets up sort of over his, use this napkin. He would pull his sheets up over his mouth like this and be looking at you, but be whispering, and then he would look over here and then whisper something. And when you asked him about it, he would just look at you like you weren't even there, or like you didn't say anything. So he was talking to somebody or something in his mind that wasn't there. A lot of times they will show inappropriate emotions and actions, again, and we've seen this in some of the other ones, but laughing at inappropriate times or being entirely flat, basically no emotion in a scenario that it would be considered appropriate to have emotions. A lot of times they have senseless or compulsive acts, or sometimes they'll be in a catatonic state, or what's listed here as catatonia. Basically, motionless, waxy flexibility. They just stare at nothing. By waxy flexibility, it means they're flexible, but you have to move them. And they don't say anything. They don't react. That's just what they do. We're going to talk about the difference between positive and negative symptoms. When you're talking about a positive symptom, you're talking about a presence of inappropriate symptoms. Just like when we talk about reinforcement, where positive reinforcement is adding something and negative reinforcement is taking something away. Positive symptoms are the addition or the presence of an inappropriate symptom, as opposed to negative symptoms where the appropriate one is kind of gone or it's been taken away. It's the absence of the appropriate ones. So positive symptoms, you have something there that isn't supposed to be there. Negative symptoms, you don't have something that should be there. Some different types of schizophrenia. The first one is organized. This is disorganized speech or behavior, or flat, or inappropriate emotion. Clang associations. Imagine the worst: systematic, sympathetic, quite pathetic, apologetic, paramedic, your heart is prosthetic. So when they speak, they use a bunch of words that sound similar. This is a clang association. And this is just how they would talk. Paranoid schizophrenia. This is kind of what you see the most of in pop culture. These are people with preoccupations, with delusions or hallucinations. If we watch A Beautiful Mind, which we'll probably do after the AP exam, he has bouts of paranoid schizophrenia. Somebody's out to get him, or he's doing something that's needed. And of course, again, catatonic schizophrenia, these people are just stiff. They don't respond. They're just there. If they're moved, they kind of stay in that place. Flat effect, again, waxy flexibility, parrot-like repeating of another's speech and movement. It's as if they're not really doing stuff on their own. They're internalizing what other people are doing to them, around them, or for them. And then there's just kind of this catch-all, these undifferentiated schizophrenia that has just a lot of different and varied symptoms. These are types that just don't really fit into those other 4 or 5 that we've talked about. How many do we have left? I may be able to finish. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and finish this PowerPoint out. So some other disorders, paraphilias. These are things like pedophilia, zoophilia, hybristophilia. Of course, pedophilia is the unnatural attraction to kids. Zoophilia, I believe, is the unnatural attraction to animals. Not quite sure what hybristophilia is. I'm sure some of you will definitely go to look it up. Fetishism, sadism or masochism. These usually involve pain, of either pain of somebody else or causing pain for yourself. Eating disorders, which we're going to talk about, and substance abuse disorders are all fall under the disorders. And this is kind of big here because these are things that are in the DSM. And ADHD. The Rosenhan study, the Rosenhan's associates were malingering symptoms of hearing voices, and so they were all admitted for schizophrenia. None of them were imposters. They all left diagnosed with schizophrenia in remission. So, what are some of the questions raised by the study? I'm going to let you all do a little research on the study on your own. So, that's going to be your homework for today, since this is going to be a fairly short video, is do a little bit of research on the Rosenhan study. And then bring that back to school. On notes, we'll do some talking about it. And therapy, this kind of gets into the next unit, but I kind of combined the disorders and then the therapy unit. So we're going to get a lot more extensive into this. This is just kind of giving us a basis for when I'm not here. But therapy used to be that if someone exhibited the normal or abnormal behavior, they're just thrown in an institution. Can't do nothing about them. They're crazy. Because of new drugs and better therapy, the U.S. went to a policy of deinstitutionalization, meaning if they can be controlled or at least somewhat normal with medication, they'll use medication instead of sending them into institutions. Under psychoanalytic theory, psychoanalysis is used as therapy. Where they will look at manifest and latent content. They'll use hypnosis. They'll use free association, dream interpretation, all that stuff. And that all kind of sounds like Freud, right? That all sounds like the psychoanalytics. There shouldn't be any surprise, at least with this one. A lot of times this is done unconsciously, or they're at least looking into the unconscious or trying to get to the unconscious, and seeing where the transference of the manifestation of the issues is occurring. Other therapies will result in symptom substitution, meaning there'll be a new behavior in place of the maladaptive one. The humanistic people, their therapy, they tend to be client-centered. Of course, that was championed by Carl Rogers. We've talked about him. These are non-directive therapies and use active listening. Of course, the hope is that they'll reach self-actualization on their own through free will and an unconditional positive regard. They'll also use Gestalt therapy, where their clients are encouraged to get in touch with their whole self, not just whatever's causing the issue. Behavioral people, their theories include counter-conditioning. So remember, these are the conditioning, classical, and classical conditioning. They'll use aversive, basically conditioning you away from that behavior. And also work on systematic desensitization, meaning they're trying to get you to not respond to whatever the trigger is that's causing you to go into those maladaptive behaviors. And a lot of times they'll sort of flood your senses with that to help get you desensitized. You know, if you think about, if you've been in, I'm thinking about it right now because I'm thinking about going to the beach here in about 20 minutes. But, you know, you get into the water, you first notice the temperature change, but after about 10, 12 minutes where the sensation is sort of flooding your body, you kind of lose the sensation or the realization that you're in water. So that's what flooding does. You just kind of flood the person with that trigger in hopes that they become desensitized to it. And then under operant conditioning, they'll use things like a token economy to get people to stop acting or stop doing those behaviors that they want them to stop doing. The cognitive people, they want to change the way their patients view the world. They want to change their thinking structures or their schemas. Championed by Aaron Beck, Albert Elliott, and the rational emotive therapy. Somatic therapies, psychopharmacological, meaning brain prescriptions. They will prescribe things like antipsychotics, Thorazine, Halidol. My dad took, I'm trying to remember what my dad took. He took a few of them when he was diagnosed with Huntington's disease because it it manifests a lot of times itself with psychopathic tendencies. Those that suffer from anxiety a lot of times will be given Valium or barbiturates or something like Xanax. Those that suffer from mood disorders will be given serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Remember, a lot of times that the issue can be too much serotonin being taken up into the back up into the neuron, so it leaves some serotonin in the synaptic gap, so that they can find their way to the receptors. Those with bipolar a lot of times are given lithium. So these are all somatic psychopharmacological therapies or drugs. Somatic therapy, electroconvulsive therapy, a lot of times was used for depression, where they would essentially run electric current through your brain. Psychosurgery, a lot of people, they used to do prefrontal lobotomies, basically dig out a big chunk of the brain in the front. Group therapy is often used. And that's it. So, what you've seen the last couple of days is more of a general overview. Hopefully you've learned quite a bit. When I get back, and actually probably over the weekend, we'll get a lot more in depth in some of the specific ones that I feel that you're probably going to see on the AP exam, and we'll be able to spend some time on those. Make sure you're taking notes, especially with me not being there. You need to be able to go back and look. Of course, I'll post this PowerPoint and probably a few others on the Google Classroom. So, hopefully you're watching these either in class or at home. I haven't decided when I'm going to post them or when I want them used. So, anyways, hope y'all are having a good week back from spring break. I know we're having a good time in New York City. And actually right now I'm in Jamaica, but I will be in New York City when you're watching this. Either way, peace out.